Hey, so the next up, it gives me great pleasure to introduce our next speaker. He's going to take us through basically their company's personal journey through BYOD. Please welcome the Director of IT Operations for Citrix, Stuart Driver.
Thank you. Morning. Just back from a round-the-world trip and inevitably picked up a cold on one of the flights around the way, so apologies if I'm a little bit croaky and so on, but we'll try and get through this. So if you come this morning expecting some kind of polished marketing presentation from a vendor, you're not going to get it from me, because my job is, I'm basically a data center guy. I'm responsible for the data centers that Citrix has outside of our corporate headquarters, which is Florida. So I have teams based in Sydney, which is, I guess, where I live, although I'm not there much, Bangalore, London, and over in the Valley in Santa Clara, and that's kind of where I've been over the last 3 weeks. So that would explain the kind of dodgy half Australian. I'm English by birth, so we have a common interest in beating the Wallabies whenever we can, which you guys do better than we do, but and work for a US company, so consumerization, whoever put the slides up has a Z in it, not an S. So that's the world I live in, Zs instead of S's. So just a little bit about Citrix. So this slide's about 6 months old. We've made a few acquisitions since then. So we're approximately 90 offices now and growing in more than 35 countries. And the company's fast approaching 9,000 employees. We actually, and I'm internal IT as I say, we actually virtualize and deliver about 125 applications to our end users. And you can see some of them that are there. We're really focused around data center and cloud services, and by the end of this year we'll be somewhere close to $3 billion in revenue, $2.9 billion in revenue. And in terms of how we're set up from a product development perspective, really focus on two main areas: desktop and cloud, which is kind of your XenApp Zen desktop, and then the online services division, which is your GoToMeeting, ShareFile, which is a recent acquisition, those types of things. So that's all I'm going to do in terms of product. That's, this is not a technical discussion. I'm not here to sell you anything. I'm here to tell you about how we do BYO. So about 4 years ago, 4.5 years ago now, we decided that we wanted to do BYO within our organization. And obviously, hands up, we have a vested interest in making this work because of the technologies which we're developing and selling to our customers and partners. And we've put this out there, and we believe that there's some good lessons to learn. And we're going through all of the second cycle almost. It's a 3-year program, so we're well into the second phase of this. But in terms of BYO, there's really two different flavors to it. I guess there's three almost, but the first flavor, and this is where we fit in, is we actually pay our employees to join the program. We have formalized kind of help and web and a formalized program that's in place. The other side of it is kind of an informal, where people say, yes, if you want to bring your device in, that's fine, we can enable it, but we're not really going to support it in the same way. The third way is where CIOs and senior IT managers just bury their head in the sand and say, there's no devices on my network. I don't put that one up there because it's probably not the way that it should be described, but there is absolutely a set of organizations where that is happening, and they're frankly the ones that are going to get caught out with some of the challenges down the line. So for us, what does BYO mean? So for us, it was BYOC, because back then there really wasn't tablets around. In fact, there wasn't any real tablets as we know them now. There was kind of old-style tablets that nobody used, and we didn't want to go into the smartphone piece at that point. So for us, it was a BYOC, specifically a laptop program. So we put it out there that our employees, and I'll probably cover this on the next slide, we went out and surveyed our employees and said, would you be interested in doing this? And we believe that these are the 5 steps that are needed to be successful in a BYO program, whether it's BYOC, BYOD. The need to survey is probably less now than it was 4 or 5 years ago when we started looking at this, because I think every single organisation that you represent is hearing from their employees, or they're actually even doing it, bringing in the devices. But there are still some organisations that we speak to that BYO is just not appropriate. And then the other thing to note is that BYO is not a one-size-fits-all. Even within our organisation, it's not a program that we force on people. It's optional. People can come into the program if they wish. And we have a lot of people that choose not to, and in that instance, they're still furnished with the appropriate infrastructure to do their work. So figure out whether there's demand. And we'll go through each of these individually, figure out how you're going to finance it, look at corporate policies, then understand the security and risk and so on that was already been touched upon, and then figure out the program rules. So for us, the survey was quite interesting because, like any IT organisation, we think we do a pretty good job of giving our employees what they need. When we went out and serviced them, the reality was that they told us that in some instances they didn't think we were doing a very good job, and some of the words were maybe a little stronger than that. And the reality was, if we gave them a grey laptop with some kind of badge with maybe a 4-letter vendor on it, they decided that they wanted a fruit-based product with a pink case to do their work. And it's like, okay, we can deliver on that. That makes sense. If you think you're going to be more productive and be able to deliver more back to the organisation because you've got some fancy silver machine rather than the grey clunky thing that we're going to give you, then fine, let's enable it. And the employee was willing to take on the extra burden, the extra responsibility to do this in some cases. So some came back and said, "You're crackers. Why would I want to manage a device when you guys are going to do it for me?" And that's fine as well. So in terms of the stipend, and this is the interesting part, so we looked at the cost, and it's a little hard to see because of the colours that I've used, but on the right-hand side there, that's the 8 traditional steps of kind of PC management, if you like, the SOE, the life cycle around that. So procure, then image it, secure it, deploy it, monitor it to see what's going on, maintain it for a period, depending on how long your refresh cycle is, back it up during that time, and then when it dies, retire it and go all the way to the back and start again and keep going through this cycle. So when we started looking at that, we worked out, and this is really hard to do, you guys will know this, that they're managing PC fleets. Unless you're a large organisation that is outsourced to some other vendor where they charge you on a monthly basis, it's hard to know what this cost is. But for us, it was $2,500 to $2,600 US dollars, but I guess it doesn't matter too much these days, but US dollars per 3-year cycle. So that's what it cost us to buy the device, buy the hardware for it, provide the support at a level 2 or level 1 and level 2 perspective, and put the software which was living on that device. It doesn't include the back-end infrastructure that enables all of this, and we can no doubt get some questions later on around the cost and the ROI around this type of program. So what we wanted to do, we aligned the program duration to, I guess, our standard asset lifecycle, which was 3 years. And we put a stake in the ground basically and said, we want to save 20%, and that's a total random number. It was frankly just to show that we could make some saving. So when we did that, it came back that $2,100 was what we were going to pay our employees if they chose to opt into this program. And that goes through payroll, so that's quite important. So they're taxed at the applicable rates, and that's a global program, so we don't make any adjustments if you live in one country over another where your marginal tax rate could be different, or where the cost of technology procurement is different. It's a one-size-fits-all. If it doesn't work for you, don't join the program, and that's the way that we pitch it. Now this is unusual based on the conversations that I've had, and more specifically the company's had with other customers of ours. So we don't know of too many other companies that actually pay a stipend. So what other organisations are doing is they're enabling people to do it, to bring in their own devices, but they're choosing not to pay the employees to do it. So they're saying, if you want to do it, that's fine. Here's how we're going to enable it. But you're kind of on your own from a financial perspective, and there's still great uptake because of some of the stats that were already up there, or some of the data that was already up there. So step 3, and this is the hardest part. So this really isn't a technology discussion when it comes down to enabling BYO and the pros and cons and so on. Really, it comes down to a policy discussion on how you're going to enable it from an HR perspective, from a legal perspective, and then the next slide, which is around the security side of it. But this part, the HR and legal part, took the longest amount of time. I don't know if we've got any HR or legal people in the room here, so I'll be a little bit, no, I won't be careful at all. These people work at a different pace to probably IT. So when you've got a project plan that says it's going to take this long to work through some of this stuff, and you introduce legal into the fold, should have been this long. So this is the bit that took us the most amount of time, and for very good reason as well. This is the bit that can trip you up, as I guess most of you that are considering doing something like this, or have done something like this would attest to. We were really fortunate in that we have a reasonably comprehensive, or very comprehensive security policy already within the organisation, and our time was taken actually going through that policy and saying, well, if we introduce BYO, does it alter what this policy needs to be? Do we need to change anything specifically for this particular program? So we went through and we changed the wording a little bit on 1 or 2 points, but very, very minimal. It was just the time that it took to get through it because it's a large policy. But this is where the time is taken. And on the HR side, you need to make sure, depending on the countries that people are working in and the local laws and so on, whether there's anything that needs to be introduced there. And certainly in Australia, the challenge is that from a BYO perspective, there's no legal precedence around this stuff. So much of it is having a good crack at it and making sure that the level of risk is appropriate to your organisation. So this is a somewhat of a producty technology type slide. It's the only one that I've got in here. All I wanted to show here is this is just around securing it, and the bottom part below the graphic is really just industry standard that any of your vendors will be working with you on in terms of firewalls, IPS, IDS, two-factor authentication, all of the standard industry security models. And you still need all of that stuff, or at least a portion of that stuff, to be able to deliver this. The top part of the line is frankly the products that we deliver, but this is how you virtualize your applications and your desktops and be able to deliver it out, so you really don't care about the end device or the network that it's sitting on. So we take a really different view. We assume that we have absolutely no control on the end device and then work back from that point, and then we actually deliver the applications, if that's the mode that people need to work on, or the desktops out of the data center, and secure the app, the desktop, and importantly, the data at that point. So all I'm trying to say here is, it doesn't bust apart any of the existing security models you have. There's probably addendums to it, but again, very important to understand the risk that's associated with rolling out a program like this needs to be appropriate to the company or the risk structure of the company that you work for. So for us, we wanted to keep the program really, really simple. There's no point trying to remove cost on one hand, but then you need an army of people on the other to administer and run the program. So for us, the program's very, very lightweight, and there are just 10 rules, and really this is all people sign up to when they join the program. First thing is the manager's approval. Here's a kind of lessons learned for us. The way that we structured it, the low-value asset pool that was funding this actually comes out of the cost center of the employee that's applying for the program. We didn't do a good enough job of explaining to the cost center manager where that money was coming from. So we rolled out this program 4 and a bit years ago, and everybody went, "Hey, IT's found a bucket of money, great, let's get in there." And went through all of the workflow, and then a couple of months later when stuff was coming out of cost centers and hitting payroll and all of that kind of stuff, we had the cost center managers come back to us and say, "You didn't tell me that it was coming out of my cost center." Well, the reality is that we did. They either didn't listen or didn't want to listen, or we didn't do a good enough job of communicating it. So we had to go back and re-communicate that piece. So that was something that we didn't do very well. In terms of the stipend, we do ask that they have maintenance on the laptop that they buy. We can't enforce it, but we ask for it. That's just obviously to ensure that they can turn it around, because they are 100% responsible for that device. They own it. It's nothing to do with us. So if it falls over, they've got to phone up their vendor and and get it repaired. In terms of point number 3, if you leave the company, and we changed this rule at the 3-year anniversary when we went through and reviewed the program, we said if you leave the company, pro rata, we can grab the money back from you so that we're not out of pocket. We didn't claim a single dollar back, and obviously there are people that left during that time because it was too hard. And when you think, $2,100 goes through over 36 months, somebody leaves after 30 months, you're trying to get back the price of a cup of coffee or something off, and it's not worth the hassle. So we changed it and said if you leave within the first 12 months, we're going to get it back from you, or try. After that, you're on your own, so not a problem there. So we changed that one. That was something that we had a rule that didn't make sense, so we took it out. Number 4 is interesting. So we have a loaner pool, which if somebody device breaks or they forget to bring it in or whatever, we just give them that loaner pool. And because the desktop or the applications is delivered from the data center, it doesn't matter. You can jump on any device and roam from device to device. So that's a diminishing returns on that one. As we've had more people join the program, there's less corporately owned devices that are out there that are coming back in that we can then give out as loaners. So what we've done is supplemented that with some, mainly terminal technologies now that the price of terminals is coming down significantly. You can get them now sub $100. So what we're doing is take a big monitor, 23-inch monitor, strap a terminal on the back of it, put it in a cupboard, it's all wirelessly and whatever, so when people come in, we call them my grab bags, they grab one, chuck it on a desk, plug it in for power, and they're up and running, and that's how we supplement that. A lot of the other stuff I've probably touched on. We do require that they have antivirus on their devices. We give them that antivirus, so as part of our corporate licensing, they're able to use the home use program as part of that with our vendor. And then the rest of it is really how you access your application, so we'll talk about that a little bit. But in terms of what is BYO, so BYO is a program that is really just around providing a consumer experience. And if you're a user within Citrix and you want to use this program or be part of this program, all you do is you hit a website, you download Receiver, so that's the only piece of software which we mandate you have to have because that's how we deliver our applications and desktops. You hit a website, authenticate, it pulls Receiver down onto your device, and then within Receiver you can configure the plugins that are needed to on the back end to be able to deliver to the end user, including your VPN and accelerator, which is your WAN optimization and so on. As part of that, we have a self-service store, single sign-on, where you can get access to your Windows, web and SaaS apps, all delivered again from the data center. And then just a couple of data points to wrap up, so the last 3 or 4 slides here. So it's got a little bit jumbled on the left-hand side there, but basically we went out and asked how many devices do you use on a daily basis? And if you look at kind of from 3 onwards, 2/3 of the people that we surveyed use more than 3 devices on a daily basis. And then if you look on the right-hand side, the green graph, how many days a week on average do you work outside the office? So there's only 1 in 5 that never work outside the office. So when you start looking at mobile work styles and the way that work is changing, again touched on earlier on, it's really significant, and you need to be able to enable that. And if BYO is one part of it, that's fine. But there's many other factors that once you get the infrastructure in place on the back end, you can then start to deliver this out to multiple use case scenarios. I'll give you another one. We're fairly heavy in the acquisition mindset at the moment. We acquired Cortex over here, start of last year. For us, M&As used to be a complete pain. So IT was always on the critical path of every single M&A. It was always us that was delaying everything in terms of the integration. When we started looking at it and saying, well, why don't we just treat them like a BYO type scenario where we're just delivering a desktop, all the applications that they need. Day one, we're able to give every single acquisition or every employee in the acquisition access to a citrix.com email address, access to everything that they need internally, email, SAP, whatever it is, and we deliver that using obviously Zen Desktop and those types of technologies, but we really don't care what that end device is. We don't care what network they're on, so we get out of worrying at that point around re-IP addressing the network, and we can take that out and do that later on. As long as they can get to a browser, we can give them access to what they need. So typically we're involved about 10 days before an acquisition closes, and we're able to deliver through on the promise of giving everybody a great first day experience. So one of the things that's kind of put out there is this is a generational thing, right? It's all of the kids, if you want to put it that's coming into the workforce that have all these fancy schmancy ideas around bringing in, doing whatever they want. But it's not. It's a behavioural change. It's not a generational change. Give you an example, and up in Australia where I live, obviously the NBN is something that's really significant, but when you start getting that kind of connectivity out into rural areas, it changes the way that companies need to think and work and act and behave. If you can get a talent pool that is not in a metro area, or that people don't need to travel an hour or an hour and a half to get into an office, then it changes the way that companies think about their talent pool. It changes the way that I guess the workplace needs to be configured and the way that people want to work within that workplace. So technology is the enabler for this, and it's not a generational thing. It's absolutely not. It's a behavioural thing, and connectivity plays a part of it. And in terms of the User experience, trying to or being able to deliver on a consistent user experience is key. And it shouldn't matter what network you're on. It shouldn't matter what device you're on. It shouldn't matter where you are. You don't need to be in the office. You can be down on the beach if that's the place that it makes most sense for you to do whatever you need to do. So, delivering on that consistent user experience is really important, and having the technology on the back end as an IT organisation to be able to just focus on what's going on in the data center and not worrying about all of that stuff that's out there is pretty powerful and pretty important for me to be able to run my business as I do. So again, this slide's jumped up a little bit, but really all this is saying is there's a whole ecosystem out there that makes this pull together. Delivering apps and desktops is part of it, but being able to collaborate is equally as important. Being able to support your end users, and being able to deliver the support mechanisms that allow them to feel like they are still getting the exact same experience from a support perspective, whether they're on the beach or whether they're in the office, really is key to making this work. And then you've got all of the other stuff which we've talked about over the last 5 years, probably around servers and the virtualization and the management of that side of it, data centers, network optimization. There is a whole ecosystem that pulls this all together, but as mentioned earlier on, if we get this right, then it's really, really powerful, and it allows you to deliver your business from an IT perspective in a totally different way. So with that, I'll hand it back.